From the curb, it looked like the kind of house you'd expect to see in a brochure. Perfectly trimmed hedges, a porch swing, yellow siding warmed by the Carolina sun. The kind of place that whispered normal. But inside the walls of that two-story house in Wilmington, North Carolina, something was rotting, something dangerous. They were the Harpers. Daniel Harper, early 40s, calm, handsome in a quiet, everyman kind of way. He worked in IT, coached youth soccer, and never raised his voice. Neighbors described him as polite, helpful, a good guy. His wife, Laura, was his opposite in every way. Strong-willed, tightly wound, the kind of woman who color-coded her spice rack and measured her worth in family photos and Pinterest-worthy dinner tables. She worked as a dental hygienist and carried herself like a woman trying very hard not to fall apart. And then there was Emma, 17, Laura's daughter from a previous relationship, a little wild, a little lost. She had her mother's sharp cheekbones, but none of her polish. Where Laura planned, Emma wandered. Where Laura demanded, Emma withdrew. Their relationship had always been tense, a simmering push and pull of old wounds and unmet expectations. Daniel was the buffer, the quiet stepfather who showed up to school plays and band recitals, who knew when to stay out of the way, who smiled from the sidelines and drove Emma to her part-time job without asking too many questions. At least, that's what everyone thought. But behind closed doors, things weren't simple. Not anymore. By the fall of 2018, Emma had started staying home more. Her door was always closed. Laura chalked it up to teenage moods. She figured her daughter was pulling away, as daughters do. But there were moments when Laura would come home and find Daniel and Emma laughing together in the kitchen, too closely, too easily. Moments when Emma would defend Daniel more than usual, when she would speak to him in that low, secretive voice reserved for someone who isn't just mom's husband. And then came the silences, unexplained tension, mood swings. Laura waking up to find Daniel already downstairs with 2 mugs of coffee, only one half drunk. Still, she didn't question it. Not yet. Because questioning it would mean breaking the illusion, the one she had fought so hard to build after her divorce. She'd met Daniel 3 years earlier. He was stable, kind, a second chance after years of disappointments. He didn't ask about her past. He didn't flinch when she admitted she had a teen daughter and baggage. He just smiled, steady as stone, and said, "We'll figure it out." And for a while, it seemed like he meant it. They blended, they settled, they built something that resembled peace. But peace built on avoidance doesn't last. And there were things Daniel never said, things Emma never should have felt, lines that had blurred slowly, then shattered all at once. By the time Laura noticed the shift, it was too late. Because love, when it slips into the wrong hands, doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it waits. It started with a phone left charging on the kitchen counter. Just a typical Tuesday afternoon. Laura had gotten home early from work, a canceled patient, a gift of time. The house was quiet. Daniel's car was gone. Emma was upstairs, door closed as always. Laundry was tumbling in the dryer. Then she saw it. Emma's phone, unlocked, buzzing. Laura didn't mean to look. Truly. She was halfway to placing it by the stairs when another message flashed across the screen. "I can't stop thinking about last night." From a contact saved simply as D. Her heart dropped. There were no brothers, no cousins, no Daves or Danis in Emma's life. Only one D. Hands trembling, she opened the thread. Dozens of messages, some sweet, Some graphic, all wrong. Photos, plans, midnight rendezvous when she was working late. Don't tell your mom. She wouldn't understand. The air in the room seemed to collapse around her. She scrolled and scrolled, breath catching in her throat as the truth revealed itself not in a single bombshell, but in 100 tiny, devastating confirmations. It had been going on for months. Laura staggered back, dropped the phone on the counter like it had burned her. For a few minutes, she just stood there. Number, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the churning of the dryer, her pulse pounding in her ears. Then she screamed. Emma came running downstairs, startled, eyes wide. Laura didn't shout at first. She just held up the phone like a corpse and asked one question, voice shaking. Is this real? Emma didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She just froze. And then whispered, I didn't mean to. But that wasn't enough, because Emma was 17, a child. And Daniel was the man who had vowed to protect her. Laura stormed out of the house before Daniel could come home, drove in circles, parked at a gas station, called her sister, sobbed until her ribs hurt. That night, she packed a bag. Not for herself, for Emma. No explanation. No chance for Daniel to twist anything. She took her daughter and disappeared into a hotel off Route 74, where the wallpaper peeled and the air conditioner rattled like bones. In the morning, she called the police. The case was delicate. Emma was close to legal age, but not close enough. And what mattered more, what weighed heavier, was the betrayal of trust. Stepdaughter, guardian, a blurred line that should never have been approached. Daniel was arrested 3 days later. The charges were swift: statutory rape, sexual exploitation of a minor, endangering the welfare of a child. When the news broke, the neighborhood split like dry wood. Some said they never trusted Daniel. Others insisted Emma was old enough to know better. But no one said it out loud, that this family, this picture-perfect house, had become a crime scene long before the law got involved. Laura tried to keep it together. She did interviews with trembling hands, stood by Emma's side in court, watched as her husband, the man she had chosen to rebuild her life with, refused to meet her eyes. He pled not guilty, claimed it was love, said it had just happened. But love doesn't happen in the dark. It doesn't hide behind a teenager's locked bedroom door. It doesn't send secret texts while your wife makes dinner in the next room. Love is honest. What Daniel had done, whatever he chose to call it, was something else entirely. And while the court prepared its case, Emma's silence deepened, because trauma, like mold, grows fastest in sealed rooms. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't always come when you expect it. Not in the courtroom, not at the police station, not even the first time you see the man you loved in handcuffs. For Laura Harper, grief came 3 weeks later, at the grocery store. She was standing in front of the breakfast cereal aisle, staring blankly at a row of Cheerios, when she realized she didn't know what kind Emma liked anymore. They used to shop together, joke about the ridiculous prices, but now Emma barely spoke. Her daughter had turned into a ghost, and Laura couldn't bring her back. That's when the shaking started, followed by the tears, quiet at first, then harder. She left the cart in the aisle, drove home in silence, and screamed into a towel until her voice gave out. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the shattering of everything she'd built. Daniel had promised stability. He had stepped in when no one else would. For a while, he was the glue. The quiet man who mowed the lawn, drove Emma to school, made her laugh when Laura couldn't. She'd trusted him with her child, her home, her heart. And now, Now she sat at the edge of her bathtub each night, wondering how she missed it, how she didn't see it coming, how she didn't stop it. Emma wouldn't talk about what happened, not in detail, not to her therapist, not to Laura. She just shrank. Some days she wouldn't come out of her room. Other days she left the TV on all night just to drown out the silence. Laura tried to reach her, tried to be gentle, but Emma flinched at touch, avoided eye contact. And when Laura asked if she felt safe, her only reply was, "I don't know what that means anymore." At night, Laura replayed it all. The birthday parties, the movie nights, the time she walked in and saw Daniel brushing Emma's hair, laughing like a father would. She'd thought it was sweet. Now, she felt sick. The media didn't help. Once the arrest made headlines, their story became public property. Stepfather accused of grooming teen stepdaughter. Mother blind to the affair happening in her own home. Pundits dissected every detail. Online forums lit up with theories, judgments, blame. Some people painted Daniel as a predator. Others horrifyingly called it forbidden love. And still others turned their scorn on Laura. How could she not have known? Why didn't she do more? How could any mother let this happen? But they didn't see what she saw. They didn't live in her shoes. They didn't understand what it's like to trust someone with your entire life, only to discover they'd been dismantling it from the inside. One night, Laura found Emma in the kitchen at 2 a.m., sitting in the dark with a bowl of cereal she wasn't eating. She looked up and said, "He told me I was special." And Laura broke, dropped to her knees, held her daughter, not knowing if she was comforting her child or begging for forgiveness. "I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over again, "because a mother isn't supposed to miss the monster. A mother isn't supposed to invite it in." But Laura had. She had let Daniel inside their lives, inside their family. And now the walls of their home echoed with a silence that wouldn't leave. The trial date was approaching. Emma would have to testify. And Laura. She wasn't sure which was worse. Watching the man who betrayed them stand before a judge, or watching her daughter shatter on the stand. Either way, there was no going back. The courtroom was quiet in that unnatural way, where even the air seems to be listening. It was early January. Outside, Wilmington was gray and damp. But inside courtroom 3B, everything felt frozen. Daniel Harper sat at the defense table in a dark suit that didn't quite fit. His hands folded neatly, his face expressionless. The same face that once smiled across the breakfast table, that once kissed Laura's forehead before bed, that once told Emma she was like a daughter to him. Now, he was just a defendant, a man accused of grooming and sleeping with his teenage stepdaughter, a man who still claimed he was innocent. On the other side sat Laura, eyes hollow, back rigid, holding Emma's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Emma was 17 now, legally barely considered a minor. But that day, as she sat behind the witness stand, feet not quite touching the floor, she looked much younger, fragile, like glass. She had tried to avoid this moment, asked if there was a way not to testify. But the prosecutor said her voice was everything, that the jury needed to hear it from her lips. The bailiff called her name. She took the oath. And then she sat. The room waited. The prosecutor's voice was calm, gentle, like someone coaxing a bird to sing. "What was your relationship to the defendant, Daniel Harper?" Emma swallowed hard. "He was my stepdad." "And how did your relationship begin to change?" Silence. Laura squeezed her hand again. Emma blinked, took a breath, and said, "He started texting me privately, saying things he didn't say in front of my mom, calling me pretty, special. Said I understood him better than anyone. Her voice didn't tremble. She kept going. How it started with compliments, then touches, small at first, a hand on her back, a squeeze on her knee, then kisses, then more. Laura closed her eyes. He told me not to tell, Emma said. Said it would ruin everything, that my mom wouldn't understand. And then the worst part. I thought maybe he loved me. The room seemed to hold its breath. Daniel never looked at her, not once. When the defense attorney stood up, the tone changed, colder, more clinical. Emma, you're a very intelligent young woman, aren't you? Emma nodded slowly. And you were nearly 18 at the time of these alleged encounters? Yes. Didn't you tell him you liked him too? I was a kid, she said, voice harder now. He was a grown man. He knew better. The defense pressed, tried to cast doubt, implied Emma had misread things, maybe even manipulated him. But every time they pushed, she stood taller. By the time she left the stand, the courtroom was dead silent. And for the first time in months, Laura felt something strange. Pride, not because her daughter had survived it, but because she had named it, out loud, in public. That night, back at home, Laura tucked Emma into bed the way she hadn't done in years. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The next day, Daniel took the stand in his own defense. He called it a mistake, said it was mutual, said Laura had driven him away emotionally, and that Emma was just there. He spoke like he was still the victim, but no one cried for him. Not the jury, not the press, not even himself. He looked up only once, when Emma walked past his seat. For a flicker of a second, his eyes softened. But she didn't look back, because some truths, once spoken, can't be unheard. And some fathers, no matter what name they wear, don't deserve to be forgiven. The verdict came on a Monday. It was raining, hard enough to blur the courthouse windows, to mute the footsteps echoing through the long marble hallway. Inside courtroom 3B, 12 jurors filed in, eyes lowered, the weight of what they carried evident in the way they walked. Daniel Harper stood for the last time. His hands were no longer folded neatly. They trembled, just slightly, as the foreperson read the verdict aloud. Guilty, on all counts. Laura didn't cry, not because she didn't feel it, but because there were no tears left. She had wept through discovery. She had wept through Emma's testimony. Now, all that remained was silence, and something heavier than grief. The judge didn't draw it out. 25 years. No chance of parole for the first 15. No apology came. Daniel looked straight ahead, lips pressed tight. No final glance toward Laura. No whispered, "I'm sorry," to Emma. Just the cold clink of cuffs against wrists as they led him away. It should have felt like justice. It didn't, because justice doesn't rewind time. Justice doesn't put trust back into a home where it was gutted. Justice doesn't erase the memory of a man sitting at the dinner table one night and in a jail cell the next. The news picked it up again. Stepfather sentenced in exploitation case that shook Wilmington. Strangers posted their opinions like they knew the inside of the Harper home, but they didn't. They didn't know the sound of Emma crying through a bathroom door at 3 a.m. They didn't know what it's like to wash sheets that smell like fear, or how Laura still checked locks 3 times, sometimes 4, because her sense of safety had been rewired by betrayal. Emma stopped going to school in person. The whispers were too much. So she learned from a laptop now, stayed close to her mother, rarely left the house, but she was healing. In inches, not miles. She started painting again, small canvases, mostly oceans and skies. When Laura asked her why, Emma simply said, "They don't lie." One afternoon, months after the trial, Laura found a letter tucked beneath her pillow. From Emma. "You didn't fail me, Mom. He did. And I still need you, even when I can't say it out loud." Laura read it 5 times, folded it neatly, slipped it into her purse like a fragile piece of her daughter she needed to keep close. Sometimes healing isn't about feeling whole again. It's about learning to live with the crack. The house felt different now, smaller, quieter. But in the mornings, there was coffee, and sunlight through the kitchen window, and Emma humming softly upstairs. Daniel's name was never spoken, not out of hatred, but because some names don't belong in the light anymore. They belong in the corners where ghosts are kept. A final note to the viewer. Stories like these don't end with the gavel. They echo, in bedrooms, in therapy sessions, in questions whispered into the dark. If you've ever felt like Laura, blindsided by betrayal, swallowed by guilt, or like Emma, misled, unheard, ashamed of something that was never your fault, let this remind you, you are not alone. Monsters don't always come through windows. Sometimes they hold your hand. And survival isn't about forgetting them. It's about reclaiming what they took.